And we're here again to meet with the membership minds. That's all of us, not just me and Scott. And I want to hear from everyone about what's going on and how everyone's preparing for a school year, new school year coming up. Obviously, some of the schools are actually opening. Some of them are virtually opening. And for those of you that are participating in ASAE Annual, I appreciate you taking the break from that and spending some time with us on this. And good to see you, Cynthia. I haven't seen you in a long time. Thanks for joining. So what's happening out there? What's going on with your membership programs? Anything that you want to talk about, feel free.
I have a question.
Hi, Megan.
That I'm hoping to get some feedback on.
Sure.
Back when the pandemic started, we extended our grace period, like I think a lot of others were doing for their members as well. But now, as this continues to go on, we're entering a phase where I don't want this extended grace to be the new normal forever. But I also, our members are in healthcare. They're mainly employed in children's hospitals. So children's hospitals, just the way this has been playing out, they've been getting really hit hard financially. So there are furloughs, layoffs, all those things happening. So we're trying to find the balance of doing right by our members, but also recognizing we need to keep things running on our end as well. And I'm just curious if anybody else is encountering that or has any advice. Right now, we're planning on keeping the grace extension in place, but it's got to turn off at some point.
Well, Megan, let me ask you a quick question. What was your grace, or was there one, and then what did you extend it to? Because I think that there's different ways that people are describing or defining this, and ASAE is an example, right? Because ASAE literally extended. ASAE has a grace period anyway, so I think it's 90 days. But then they literally extended your membership. They pushed it 90 days. So I was an August expire. Now I'm a November expire. So is that what you're talking about, or are you just letting people stay on your membership roster?
Yeah, we're letting people stay on. We always had a 30-day grace. We're now at 90 days. And it's also, our community is pretty tight-knit. So there have been enough people that have had their renewal cycles come through that have known that, ACLP is doing this extra time, that is starting to become more widely known. And not a bad thing. I mean, we want people to know that we're trying to do right by them, but at the same time, there are those that could pay it now. And just trying to balance those that really need the assistance and those that could pay now and just aren't because they know there's an extra 90 days.
So you're on an anniversary.
Yes.
Okay. So the 90 days basically starts at their expiration date.
Correct.
Okay. So right. So that's the tough part, is that it's kind of a rolling thing that it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Megan, what I would say, I think a lot of people are facing this, and I'll let other people speak as well. But I mean, I wonder if there's a way that you can say very nicely, don't take advantage of us. We are doing this to help you. If you can pay us, pay us. Just because we've extended your grace period or your timing that you can pay us doesn't mean you have to wait. I'm horrible, right? Because I'm a marketer and a membership person, and I want people to pay on time when I do this. But CalSAE extended my membership, just a grace period. So what did I do? I'm like, I've got a note on my calendar that like a week before that grace period ends, I'm going to pay them, because why would I pay if I don't have to? I know that's horrible and I shouldn't admit that publicly, but I think people do. And so, is there a way that you can play up, all right, we are here for the industry. We are here for you as industry professionals. So if you can afford it, pay us now. Don't be a Scott and hold on until the last minute. Actually pay us when you can.
You can use that as a hashtag. Don't be a Scott. But no, no, don't do that. But yeah, and I see where Scott's coming from. I also see that maybe you transition maybe into maybe an option. Where you send them something saying, hey, we've done this, and now that everything is somewhat getting back to normal as we prepare for our budgeting for 2021, or that you can use any of that type of thing as excuse. We're trying to project things. So we have changed our policy, and we're no longer just giving this out. If you need it, please contact us, that type of thing. It's almost like, please contact us if you really have a need, and we will extend your grace period to 90 days. But for the most part, we're going back to our normal system.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're trying to get into place to maybe balance is that we're pursuing some funding for hardship waivers, so that would be a clean way of doing this, but I don't know whether that funding is going to come through or not. So yeah, I was just curious, how others were handling it, because it's gone on longer than we thought back in March.
Yeah, I think Megan, it's not just in membership that this is happening. I actually had a brief conversation this morning, and I think, let me say this, we have to be careful not to overreact, right? I understand that some industries have been crushed and some industries have been harder hit than others, but there is money there still. And so we have to be careful. And where I was going with this conversation I had this morning, and I don't want to transition this to virtual events again, but a client of mine, they reduced their price from their face-to-face when they went virtual. And yet still on their online communities, like 3 people over the last week, when they really started pushing attendance and registration, bitched. And now the board is freaking out. We need a statement. We need to do something. We need to whatever. And I'm not the person in charge of attendee marketing in this situation. So I'm being quiet. Even though I have lots of opinions, I am being quiet on what they should do. And already like 2 members of the board said, well, you guys dropped it from $4.99 to $149. Let's drop it to $29. And I'm like, what? You can't just drop it to $29. I mean, I guess you could, to use ASAE as a bad example. ASAE went from whatever it was to zero, right, because the market stood up and said, we're not registering. And now they've got 12,000 people registered for free for annual conference, right? I don't know how many people are going to fully participate. We're all here when we could be participating. So, that tells you something. Yeah. But we got to be careful not to completely overreact. And I like what Dan said is put it out there that we're back to normal. And yet, if you are still having hardships by this, if you really can't afford it, contact us and we'll work with you. And then it's more proactive on their end, as opposed to just you giving it to everyone without them having to do anything at all.
It's funny because I've had kind of gotten wind of other stuff out there with other organizations, including my own, that, there's some talk about, well, to prop up, a lot of organizations probably using the reserves or are planning on using their reserves as 2021 comes around, knowing that events probably are not going to happen in person, and that, those, the prices that, Scott was just talking about is not going to, make your budget look as good as it was this year. There's kind of talk about like special assessments to ask your members for on the trade side, especially trade associations, where it's almost like, I think they liken it to like church, or if you're a part of a country club or something, every so often they have a huge project and they're like, okay, we're going to charge all members a special assessment to actually help us fund this. And it's interesting what's happening out there when it comes to that. So has anyone else kind of caught wind of that, from your leadership or what's happening out there?
Well, Dan, of course, we were referring to ASAE here just now. I did watch one program that was purely just based on the finance folks yesterday, because I've been very curious about, associations don't really do good activity-based costing. So if we were to say, hey, the new normal is going to be, we used to have 40% of our gross revenue came from our conferences, and we think that the new normal is 15% is going to come from it. Do you RIF those people? Do you also dip into reserves temporarily? Well, what does that sort of new equilibrium, financial management sort of structure look like? And even in that session yesterday, I didn't hear a lot of people looking at this thoughtfully, because I think a lot of people still have this mindset that no, well, once COVID's kind of over, it'll be better. And I think that that's kind of an asinine way to look at it, because, like Scott's saying, hey, maybe ASAE isn't the best example, but they got 1,200 freaking people, or 12,000 people to sign up, when they brag about 6,000 and half of them are wearing, CVB shirts. So, from my standpoint, once you get people in this other habit, they are more enfranchised. You just have to find a way to price them properly. So I don't know if I'm sort of like beating an issue to death that like a lot of us have already thought of, but I do think that there's just not that much of a strategic view, which is why Scott's seeing, some of these boards saying silly things like, well, if we drop the price once and it should work, let's drop it again. Because at some point we have to find like a new equilibrium. How much, is an online education program worth? Do we have to hire specialists in that area, or at least retrain our folks who do that? And that's just the big picture. I don't have specific clients that are really struggling, because most of them weren't that meetings reliant anyway, because I guess that's probably why they hired me instead. Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm sorry if we got sidetracked, Megan. Did you have some other questions, or do you think that, does anyone else want to chime in on what Megan was talking about as far as the grace period and the transition on that?
Well, Dan, one thought that I had on the grace period, and Scott and I used to, when we would do membership reviews, we'd oftentimes encourage people to tighten that grace period, maybe because, don't be a Scott is a good hashtag. But I do think that MGI's study has been very revelatory the last couple of years, where they acknowledge it's only correlation. I watched Tony's presentation for the brown bag in Alexandria on Wednesday for the 2020 version, and the continued correlation of having a longer grace period with retention rates is quite high. And so my own theory, again, just trying to think of this empirically, Megan, is that when you do extend, a grace period a little bit more, like you said, doing it selectively, coming up with some institutional solution really should help you, because if you don't have, I liken it kind of in a weird way to guarantees, money back guarantees, where a lot of times what we're trying to do is make life easier for our members, because chances are you've only got like a finite pool of people, and they are close knit, they talk to each other. The goodwill that comes from giving someone a break when they're actually having a hard time is very helpful. If there's other people concurrently who are actually getting a break for no good reason, they might brag it up too. And so I always feel like you have to do that reputation management side of things too, where having a policy in place to where, you do actually file for hardship and have it recognized that the reason we're giving you a longer grace period is because we know you've had a tough time is a heck of a lot different than just blanket amnesty for people, which is going to cost you when you least can afford it. So.
Thanks,
Yeah, I think,
everyone.
Megan, at the end of the day, you guys need to pick a point where you're going to do something, right? It's
Right.
strategically, you've got to make a decision on when it is. Is it October 1? Is it November 1? Is it you're going to let it go through any expires or renewal groups to the end of the year, and then you're going to do something? But there needs to be a point where you do it. And even just for internal understanding and internal knowledge, what are we as an organization doing and when are we doing it? And then you talk about it. I mean, one of the reasons I think maybe the end of the year is the way to go. And I know that this is completely abnormal. And so it's not like that any sort of testing or any sort of data we're getting today is going to be relevant forever, because this is not a world, as we've all said this a million times, this is not a world we've ever seen before or experienced before, and hopefully we'll never experience again. And so, what I was going to say is take a look. You could take a look and see how many people are now paying in that extended grace period.
Right.
From the groups that you've offered it to, how many are? So is it going to help you down the road, but still this pandemic effect, impact, whatever you want to call it, has to end at some point, or it has to normalize at some point. And you guys are just going to have to make that decision. And maybe that data, if you see, let's just say you guys started it with the March Expire group, and you found that 60% more of those people are paying during that extended grace period than normally do. And then the April group, it gets a little bit less. Then the May group, it gets a little bit less, and so on and so forth. Then that will give you an idea of maybe that it's going downwards. So the impact is going downwards. So that will give you a little bit more of an idea of, all right, if we can go this direction through December, I'm just making that up, then we have a good idea that those numbers are dropping. So we don't have to worry about as many people getting offended or being politically correct or sensitive to all these folks, because that number keeps dropping and we've got the data that shows us that that number keeps dropping.
That's a great point, and it'll be much easier to get others on board, especially our board, if we can show that people aren't going to be too adversely impacted.
Yeah.
I mean, I think unfortunately, even though the board sees the financials, they want to be super extra nice to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if 1 or 2 or 10 people are really loud about the problems that they're having, they react to that. And that's hard, because then, ultimately you guys all report to the board. So, where somebody's got to have the strength to say, well, no, look here, and the data can help you have that.
Right. I completely agree with Scott. And actually that's, I'm glad you brought that up, Scott, is the data really tells the story here. And, you got to really track what's really going on, and hopefully had some tracking, benchmarking data before you extended that grace period to show to the board or anyone else that, that they still paid within the same amount of time, even though we gave an extension to the grace period maybe, or that the grace period actually really helped, and we actually got a lot of folks to do it past those 30 days, and that we did a lot of goodwill, and that really helps. So now it's time to kind of pull back on that, or maybe even it will change your decisions about how long your grace period should be later. You might change it to 60 days and say, that actually works, well for everyone. And, that could be rolled out as a huge win for your members, and say, hey, in 2021, we've made it a standard for the entire year. We're going for 60 days as, extended grace period for everyone. That type of thing goes a long way, increasing the value of what you're doing for them. I think there was another point I wanted to make as far as, is your messaging the same as it was during that time? Whatever notices that you had going on around the grace period or expiration date, have you changed them to say that it's 90 days?
Every renewal message that we send has changed, and myself and our Marcoms director meet before everyone goes out now to just make sure we're timely, appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, our members are in healthcare, so we're trying to be extra sensitive.
Right. Yeah. So that's that, again, going through and adjusting that again is just to say, you have the option to go 90 days if you choose, versus, cutting it off or saying it just that you only have 30 days. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah. In healthcare, it's just right now, I'm in the food industry, so getting the attention of the grocery retailers and the wholesalers right now is pretty difficult too. And I'm thinking that it's going to be even worse, because we're on a calendar year, that I'm going to start asking for renewals in November, Thanksgiving and the holiday. They're not even going to be paying attention to me. So it's going to be even more difficult for us to get their attention that time. But best of luck with all of that.
Yeah, Megan, another thought that I just had, and it may be a little bit, you could say this is a little bit risky, is letting them have their normal grace period, but then reducing their benefits from that 30 to 90 day window. So maybe it doesn't cost you guys as much to serve them. Of course, you would have to know what your expenses are for serving them for that 60-day period, but would that be, I know that it seems kind of harsh and kind of mean, right? But, you're giving them maybe enough value and sort of floating them, and it could cause some complications, I understand, with what their renewal date is, because, they're not really getting full membership. And so should their renewal date stay the same? Should it be bumped? Whatever it might be. But I was just thinking if there's a way that you could reduce your expenses a little bit, because you're basically floating a certain number of people, right? You're providing benefits which have a cost to a certain number that are not going to renew. That's to me, when Kevin was mentioning before, we typically suggest tightening that window. My thing is the reason to tighten that window is because, first of all, you're training some of them, which is what you guys are learning right now. You're training some of them that they can wait that long because they're all talking to each other, right? I don't think that that's true in every organization, but your people are all talking to each other. So they're all going, hey, you don't have to pay in for another 3 months, right? Well, why are we paying now? So that's one issue. The other issue is that no matter how good your organization is, and I say this for all associations, not everyone is going to renew. So a certain percentage of that grace period, you're just giving away benefits for free to a certain number of people or a certain number of companies. So there is an expense to that. So is there a way to kind of tweak it a little bit where you don't? I don't know. It's just a sort of an outside, sort of an extreme thought of, is there a way that you can reduce your expenses a little bit, but still maintain them as members? I don't know. It's just something kind of out there to think about.
Happy to hear from others on this. Has everyone, or let's, who has actually extended, their grace period? Has that anyone else? Hard to see hands if you don't have video on, but
we extended our grace period for a couple months for back in March, April, and May, and to be honest, we probably picked up an additional handful of members. And again, we have a 90-day grace period now, which I know for Scott, that's way too much. It's how we budget our membership numbers. It's been baked in forever, but we went to 120 days for, again, March, April, May. And then, looking at the numbers, I recommended that was it. It wasn't worth continuing to do that.
Yeah. And it's almost one of those perceived value things to me. It's, whether they use it or not, it still, provides a perception that you're helping out quite a bit. Megan, do you think, or are you guys planning to have a dues increase for the next year?
Very unlikely.
Unlikely. Okay. And so, again, I hear a lot of that too, from others. Anyone else? What is the talk about that?
So this is Cindy. We're not having a dues increase, but we're launching a new membership model so our members value education and our on-demand webinars in particular. So we're launching a new model at a higher rate where they have access to all of our on-demand webinars. And I'm in the process now of budgeting and trying to figure out exactly how many are going to take advantage of that. Because for some of the states, they require certification CEUs. And so for those individuals in those states, that could be attractive, but there's only a handful of states that require that. So it's not like every state has that requirement. Also, you can get those CEUs through our annual meeting. So I'm trying to take all of that into consideration. And I do have a question more about budgeting. Is everyone budgeting flat for next year? Are you budgeting for any increases? I'm really curious as to what you all are doing in terms of budgets and what you're hearing out there about others.
I can speak to that. We have a July 1st fiscal year. So I had turned in my budget first week of March, and I redid my budget the end of April, and we actually did budget flat, where the last few years we had growth every year.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with this, Cindy, but one of my clients is budgeting actually a drop. They're expecting a drop in retention, and Kevin and I actually worked together on their recruitment campaign, and we're hoping to do as well. But I'm guessing that our response is going to be down some too.
We start our budgeting process for 2021 in the next month or so, and nothing for sure yet, but I would anticipate we're going to be budgeting flat or reduced across the board.
Yep, I was just going to say same here with us. We start our budgeting within the month. We are hoping to not propose a dues increase at all for 21. We're hoping to keep it flat. We actually had, I work with the Juvenile Products Manufacturers Association, and we actually had a pretty large dues increase for 2020. Our membership model is totally crazy based on a lot of others, since it's company based and we go on a revenue sliding scale. So your dues are higher if your yearly annual sales are higher. So there were some categories that had potentially 100+% increase from 19 to 20. So we're hoping to keep it flat. I think we're projecting a little bit of a decrease overall in budget, but we are the same thing. We're just starting with that. And to chime in on the grace period for membership, ours was actually right around the time COVID started, was when our grace period was supposed to be over. Right in the middle of March, which was actually also right before our trade show was going to happen. So we put everything on hold and gave people a little bit longer of a time frame to do things, because everyone went into shutdown mode completely.
Rita, I think you brought up an interesting wrinkle that I hadn't actually thought of, is that, just from a tactical perspective, right? Your guys' sliding scale. So if their business is down, that means their dues go down. I know typically associations have a challenge tracking that anyways, right? It's like, how do we prove what your revenues are? And so, not to add fuel to this already challenging fire, but that's a whole another angle that you guys got to think of, right? It's like, you can have a direct correlation. The industry's down, there's a direct correlation to what your dues are going to be, right? Which is almost harder than just saying, oh, our normal retention rate is 90%, now it's going to be 80. You guys might have the same retention rate, but your dues amounts may drop by, I'm going to make up a random number, 50%. And it's like, we retained as many people, but our income dropped by 50%. That's not good. So that's hard.
It's the ongoing issue, honestly, that we have in our association, because we do go on an honor system, really. I say that many of our members are obviously public companies, so we could look up technically and see what they're making. And there's a few of us on staff that when people drop a dues class, we kind of look, nope, they just want to have a lower dues this year. Yeah. We are actually looking to put in place a model. It was supposed to go for 2020, but we put it on hold with what we're calling like a best brand practice and statement, where we will actually audit them as well, and they'll have to submit audit statements. So we can kind of keep track of that and catch probably a lot of people in their fibbing on their dues class. So we'll see potentially if we can get the board to fully approve that model for 2021. But it happens every single year. People drop dues classes because, especially if dues increase, they want to potentially keep that dollar amount based on their budget, the same as what they had a previous year.
Yeah, it's, again, I mentioned FMI is the Food Industry Association, retailers, wholesalers. So, it's kind of be careful what you wish for with us. Their sales are, through the roof compared to previous years. So, we're thinking 2021 might be a great year for dues, but also, there's going to be a bunch of them that are going to see sticker shock because, they're like, I'm not even sure I want to, share our sales figures knowing that they're such a abnormal year. So we've been discussing a lot of that on how are we going to project this, knowing that it is the honor system. And yeah, we have places that we look up their sales where we can, even, private companies, but it's really hard to go to them and say, well, no, this is your sales figures. Don't get, you can't get away with that. you know, we want them to be on the board. We want them to be members. We want them, you know, we don't want to have to, you know, go down that path. So it's a tough one that we're trying to figure out ourselves, because we also know that whatever they pay in dues in 2021, based on fantastic 2020 sales, 2022 is going to be a down year for us comparatively. So we, you know, we have to really kind of think ahead and make sure that we take care of our members, but also, you know, take care of the organization, knowing that, you know, you know, our events are kind of dead in the water in some cases, and we're not going to be seeing the revenue from that side of the organization. So difficult to project. You know, it's like, you know, you have a crystal ball that completely is filled with smoke. What are you gonna, what's in there? I don't know. I have no idea. Well, it's just past 1. Is there any other questions that anyone has, or, you know, topics that you want to discuss, or, you know, get some sense of from the group here? Standard pause time. Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you all get back to, if you're you know, participating in ASAE, feel free to do that. And I think it's a great value there to get in there. But feel free to email myself or Scott or any of us if you have any questions. And I really appreciate everyone participating, and everyone stay well. And we'll talk to you again next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
y'all.
Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.